How about number that his father is sick in the hospital with prostate issues, health issues? Please, let's still donate generously. I put the details, uh, you know, and all of that. So I've put the details out there. So, truth has to be said, we need to help that our brother as much as we can, and help them so much because they are in need. In the past, we have also done many empowerment programs. When I was on Inspiration FM, there was a man that after doing a site surgery, we helped him set up. We also gave him money to set up a business. And these are many things we have done. Today, we're going to continue with the series on unforgiveness, which is a very, very sad one in our society, because a lot of people don't want to forgive. A lot of people don't want to forgive. Their hearts are hard. And unforgiveness leads to war. Unforgiveness leads to repression. Unforgiveness leads to disaster. Unforgiveness leads to pain. Unforgiveness leads to death. The truth is, you have to summon the courage to be able to forgive. And today, we're going to open up the phone lines on 0818-099-1991 on people that truly want to forgive people today. People that truly want to forgive people. Because if you don't forgive, then a lot of hurt that you carry will debilitate you. It will break you down. It will shatter you. It will cause war and chaos. The truth is, it is unforgiveness that harbors the hate of the past and destroys the prospect of any nation. It is unforgiveness that causes ethnic tension. Today, we keep talking about ethnic tension across the country. It is unforgiveness that causes it. Unforgiveness will also cause problems with the economy, because you won't be able to perform effectively to the higher level of productivity. So I'm going to tell you the need to be able to forgive today. And that's why the likes of Nelson Mandela spoke about it. Fostering forgiveness, fostering hope, fostering reconciliation after the apartheid. After the Rwandan genocide, fostering hope, fostering confidence. Kagame tried also to do that work. At first, let me tell you what unforgiveness done to your health. There's increased stress. Holding grudge triggers chronic stress. It raises your cortisol level and will weaken the immune system. It increases the risk of conditions like heart disease and diabetes. I remember the story a doctor friend of mine once told me. He uses some form of alternative medicine about a woman that came to his facility that had cancer. And on therapy sessions, he discovered that the woman had a lot of unforgiveness in her heart. And he cooled down her mind, gave her the need to forgive and all of that. And she started to do well health-wise. But something triggered the resentment again. And as it triggered the resentment, then she started to have the problems again. The woman finally died of that cancer situation. It shows you that by not forgiving somebody, definitely you hold a lot against yourself. You are the one holding the dagger to your heart and is stabbing you, while the person that you have not forgiven keeps walking free. So the question is, when will you set yourself free from this pain? Unforgiveness can also lead to mental health issues, depression, anxiety, emotional exhaustion. Do you know resentment can elevate your blood pressure and your heart rate, increasing hypertension and cardiovascular disease over time? If you have an unforgiving spirit, it affects and simulates and goes into your body and it starts to affect your blood pressure. You will not be able to sleep at night. All you are doing is to plot evil, and your body cannot rest correctly. Sleeping problems. Harboring unforgiveness can lead to disrupted sleeping pattern, which lead to insomnia and poor quality of sleep. If you have a fight with somebody I have not forgiven them, you can't sleep properly. How much more you now having longer level of unforgiveness? By me telling you to forgive, I'm not saying I don't want to acknowledge the fact that the person hurt you. All I'm saying is that by forgiving, you give yourself some peace. You give yourself some mental liberation. You remove yourself from that pain. Once again, like we said today, we are raising money for Kelechi's father. I've put out the account number on my Facebook, on my Twitter. Please support him. He says he needs a certain amount. A lot of people are saying it's scam. No, like I told you, from time to time, see, the reason why God gave me following is to help humanity. And this has been all my life. Over the last 20 years, I can't count how many people I've helped. The reason why God put me in media is to contribute my time to helping humanity. And anything, any popularity I get is to be able to help humanity. And that's what I've done over 20 years. From Warri in Delta State, I've been helping a lot of people, helping humanity with the radio platforms. Up to the northern part of Abuja, Nasarawa, with our partnership with Icon of Hope Foundation. Up to, the work we've done in Lagos, Ogun State, a couple of other states. So we keep helping humanity. So from time to time on my page, when people send me requests that they are sick and they need to raise money, I will be posting it out. So do not think it's fake or it's not checked. I've checked it. For me, most of the time, is to save the life first. That's my priority. And what a lot of you do not know is that some of the needs, before I even post them out, I've given my own quarter. God knows how much of my personal funds go into helping people. Scholarship schemes and everything. We still help people to pay for their school fees. There are many people that benefited one way or the other from my scholarship and help. So the truth has to be said. We still keep helping people. So by the time I post a picture out seeking help, many things have also gone on. I've also looked for other places to be able to help those people. Most of the time, I've also added my funds to it. I've also sent my widow's mite to it. What unforgiveness also does is it gives you chronic pain. There are studies that have revealed that unforgiveness can amplify pain perception, contributing to like chronic back pain. So if you have chronic back pain and the likes, please check yourself and check your heart. Check yourself and check your heart. A lot of resentment might also be the issue. Unforgiveness can lead to digestive issues, chronic anger, resentment that may contribute to acid refluxes due to stress-related inflammation. So these are the harmful parts of unforgiveness. Unforgiveness can lead to social division and conflicts, perpetuating cycles of injustice. The biblical example of Jonah's forgiveness towards Ninevites illustrates how harboring resentment can lead to the desire for destruction rather than reconciliation. The truth is, two wrongs don't make a right. Everybody can claim that they have the truth and the facts of the matter to favor their arguments. But if people don't come together to make peace and allow resentment and war happens, nobody, I repeat, wins in a war. That's why I tell every ethnic group, unity is the best. It's not in your best interest to fight or kill each other. Everybody can lay claim to anything, but unity is the way forward. Erosion of trust in institutions. What can lead to unforgiveness? And you see, the truth is also, you as somebody that they forgive, it is also incumbent on you to try as much as possible to never keep hurting the people that forgive you. To never keep hurting the people that forgive you. Economic stagnation. Things do not move. Unforgiveness leads to inequality in society. Because you cannot forgive somebody, or because a certain tribal group hurts you, and you're in a certain position, you now say you will deny them of their rights. It's not a good one. Inequality destroys society. Unforgiveness destroys society. It leads to a moral decay. It leads to bloodshed. It leads to pain. I keep asking, after we fought so hard against each other in the Civil War, what did we gain? We gained a lot of unforgiveness. We gained a lot of pain. We gained a lot of avarice. So, unforgiveness is a terrible one. It's a terrible one. The truth has to be said. Also, public health impacts. Health effects of unforgiveness can bring about stress. Lack of reconciliation can also destroy society. We must promote forgiveness interventions. We must bring about the truth and reconciliation. We must constantly educate people. The problem we see is that I see a lot of educated illiterates in society. And when you make arguments, they don't understand arguments. They start to fool around and show their foolishness by causing chaos and fights and division. People that do that is a reflection of their sad mind. People can disagree. People can have divergent opinions. People can state facts. It's fact for fact to buttress their facts. If I state a fact based on information available to me, you state yours. But when you resort to abuses, you become stupid. And that's part of the problem in our society. There's a lot of pain and senselessness. And sometimes you wonder education is a waste. And I don't like to blame social media for it. Because this has always been the mindset of the people. Social media is garbage in, garbage out. Social media is just a platform. But it's a reflection of the decay in people's hearts that reflects what they say and their outlook to life. And the decay is so much that people cannot have viable, very great disagreements and state facts and expect people to present counterfacts. But all they present is foolishness. And that's why we must build society through a lot of education. Once you resort to abuses in the process of making your point, then you become foolish. And it's the total level of foolishness that pervades society. Once you resort to lies in making your point, you become foolish. Once you resort to blackmail in making your point, you become foolish. You become senseless. All you need to do is state facts and don't be foolish. Don't be senseless. Don't resort to abuse and blackmail and lies. And that's part of the streak of unforgiveness. So we need to go back to sensitization because a lot of people, their hearts are weakened. And it's not a case of social media. It's a case of the reflection of the hearts of people. An average mind is very gullible. It must be tested through rigor. An average mind is always very sentimental and gullible. An average mind is very sentimental. So you have to test it through rigor. So when people blame social media, I keep saying it's just another platform. Yes, it's quick, but there were also fake news spreaders during the days when we had newspapers. People particularly set up newspapers to spread fake news. So it's not today, but your mind must be renewed. You must have a robust spirit to be able to accommodate every fact and be rounded, and not to resort to insidious abuse and sheer expression of a great level of stupidity, because that's what our society has become. That's what our society has become. Ignoble stupidity. They are quick to abuse. All we say is state opposing facts. People can have different facts about a matter. If I state my facts, state your facts. And when you become stupid and you start spreading blackmail and sheer stupidity, these are the streaks of unforgiveness and a hardened, stupid mind. But you see, a lot of minds have been cut off, and it has left the educated ones are the most stupid ones now because they lead others astray because they don't want a faculty of facts to exist. I'm saying put all the facts on the table. Let's weigh them. Let's have arguments. Let's have interactions. But we don't have that. That's why Bob Marley said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. If your mindset, you get, if your mindset is just about mental slavery, you will not be open to concise conversations. I think it was Chuba Kadigo that says, after your education, if you are still about tribe and tribal bigotry and you don't think clearly, then your education has been a waste. So a lot of people need to open their minds and stop the bigotry. Because it's part of the bigotry, that's the reason for our tribal strife in the country today. It's part of the reason for our tribal strife. And you see, when people carry this nefarious thing, hook, line, and sinker propaganda, they carry it on their heads. Just like the Burkina Faso propaganda they are carrying now, which is all lies. We all know the Burkina Faso propaganda is peddled. All of a sudden, people are saying Burkina Faso is having XYZ billions in their economy. Same, you see, and you know, the fact is, people cannot even think deeply. So they carry lies, and it speaks volumes. Let's all check. What's the GDP of Burkina Faso? Just wait. If the GDP of Burkina Faso is up to $20 billion, I'll be surprised. Right on point. I was correct. $20 billion. So what they now carry a rumor is that Burkina Faso is what's it called? It has $16 billion in gold. So I'm like, a country will sell about $16 billion, and when its GDP is $20 billion, it's about $16 billion in gold. That's how they carry the propaganda of Ivory Coast. The coup happened in Ivory Coast, and they put it on their head so much. And when you tell these people to bring their facts, they start to shout. It's part of a broken heart, and they champion lies. All we are saying is bring your facts to the table. Because facts are verifiable. And you see, these are the things breaking our country. We need to fix this country. We need to fix this country from a standpoint of intellectual reasoning. We can disagree, but we must not be stupid and disagreeable. We can disagree, but you bring your facts forward. But when you bring the facts forward, people start to shout. You can disagree. I'm not saying don't disagree. In fact, let's have a celebration of facts and opinions and ideas. But once you become stupid in abuses and all of that, then it becomes a lie. And part of the lies, the propaganda they push in Burkina Faso is they show you one tomato production plants, they show you this. Like there are no production plants in Nigeria for tomatoes. Are you kidding me? Let's not be deceived and let's not be delusional. We know where most of this propaganda is coming from because there are some higher powers at the back that benefits. This is another layer of colonialism. But a lot of people swallow this the hook, line, and sinker. But see, people like us will be here as the champions of the truth, as the champions of the truth. Keep challenging thought process. And if you have a better fact system, you bring it forward. We challenge it together. But it starts with purging your mind. and having forgiveness be your watchword. Hello, how are you? Who is this? Hello? 0818-099-1991. You need to forgive. You need to forgive. You need to forgive. Somebody said, with due respect, leave Ferrari alone. No, I'm going to speak my truth. You can't stop me from speaking my truth. I don't care for propaganda. Hello, how are you?
Hi, sir. Good morning, sir.
Morning, what's your name?
My name is Bruce. I'm calling from the Koto area.
Oh yeah, who do you want to forgive this morning?
Yes, I'm the one I've called like three Sundays ago. So you said you sent my account number. I've sent my account number.
So Ruth, if they've not reached out to you, you have to be patient. Because things are tough for people. So if they help you, it's out of the magnanimity of their heart. And if they don't help you, it's fine. So you've given it out. If they reach out to you, it's fine. It's not a must you must receive your blessing from here. You can receive it anywhere.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Please, I will pay back when I collect it. I will pay back.
No, it's not me that I'm going to give you. It's not about me paying you. I've said reach out to people. I've given you a chance to give your account number out on there.
Yes, sir.
So that's just it.
I want to use it in my restaurant.
I know you've talked about that, and I've given your details out. So that's just it. So you wait till people can help you.
Sir, I
Ma?
have calculated all the total amount.
No, madam, you wait till people can help you. You've made that request before. Thank you.
Sir.
0818-099-1991. 0818-099-1991. No, I'm going to state the facts, and you can't stop me from speaking the truth. And I'm not here to believe every social media propaganda. I'm here to sieve the truth out for myself and say it the way it should be said. I'm here to ensure that we have a faculty of rich interactions and rich ideas. That's my priority. I'm not here for sentiments. Like I said before, I'm not here for you to make you happy. I'm here to speak the truth at all times. That's just it. So it's not a popularity contest. It's not a popularity contest. I don't want to be popular. I don't want to be liked. I want to be a man that says the truth fearlessly. And if you have counter truths, send it to me. I'll highlight it. Hello? Bless you, what's your name? Hello? Oh, we lost that. 0818-099-1991. So you can tell all your lies as you want to lie and say Western back propaganda. I mean, that's your lies. When you don't have anything to say, you say all this rubbish. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Hello, yeah, what's your name?
Hello?
Hello, I can hear you.
Yeah. My name is Awala. I'm calling from Wari.
Yes, Awala.
Yes. I want to commend you for the efforts you have put to clarify a lot of wrongs that have been done over the years with propaganda. And I'm asking for calling this morning. I will also suggest if more people can talk from both angles, so you can be the judge of.
Hello? Oh, the phone line went off. So, like I said, while calling me from Wari there, I put out every fact. Robos have sent me their facts and court cases. when I see Shekiri people have put the robo fact forward, Ijos have sent me their own facts. I'll put the Ijo facts forward. Shakiris have sent me their facts. I reeled out some of their facts based on two cases I itemized. And I read these cases fast. The case in which Ifamagbemi had to be joined and Doreen Moore case in 26 and the Supreme Court case where the of 1974, the Okumaba case, where the Shekiri says that's to give them a radical title. That what was given to Okumaba there was possessionary title. But I've also seen some accounts of the Jaws where the judge says they have also won many cases. I've seen the accounts of the Robos where they said, oh, we also own the land because the British signed treaties with Agbasa. The Shekiris have said otherwise that those treaties were not true. So I've seen many conflicting sides. All I do is to learn from many sides and put this fact forward and we test them for time. So that's just it. But today we are still talking about forgiveness. Forgiveness is key in everything we do. If you want to forgive somebody, reach out to me. Today, later in the show, I have to play some interviews I've done with some candidates of, leading candidates of the African Development Bank. 3 of them. It's over an hour. It's a very interesting document. Credit to Arise TV for that. We're going to reprise it here for all of our radio audience, so you get a chance to listen to it fully. Because African Development Bank, what happens there affects us. So you need to hear the candidates. You get so 0818 099 1991. 0818 099 1991. We need to forgive, and leaders must also lead the charge for forgiveness. Leaders must also lead the charge for forgiveness. Hello, how are you?
Good morning, sir.
Morning, please speak of what's your name?
It's America from Mako.
Eh? From I can't hear you very well. Hello? Please, when you call, speak up louder. 0818 0818 099 1991. All right. So call us up on those phone lines. We will take on the calls and get your thoughts. So we're going to be playing that. And next week, in the course of next week, we're also going to play something. Yeah. Somebody is saying here that the document Treaty of 1893 is unknown to the British. But some Europeans also claim that document was that document was presented in court recently in 2020, and they accepted it in court, the document of the treaty. So I keep putting on the fact that hello.
Yeah, morning. Good morning, Rufai.
What's your name?
Yeah, this is Sodera. I'm calling from United Kingdom.
Okay, Adera, go ahead.
Yeah, so Rufai, most of us celebrate you. We
Yes.
know you are not just anybody that talks anyhow, and most of us take whatever you say seriously.
Yes.
So regarding the Burkina Faso trial conversation,
Yes.
I think your post have left me more confused.
Okay.
And I would like you to sort of explain it properly. Are you accusing the Russians, or are you saying the West are better off with what is happening in Burkina Faso? Please just throw more light.
Okay. So let me throw more light. Number one, I am for African liberation, but I am not for African liberation through coups. I am from African liberation through strengthening of democratic institutions. At first, the way and manner a coup happening is an aberration, and we must not support it. Because it is Traore today in Burkina Faso. Tomorrow, if another mutiny within the military comes in Burkina Faso, then if Traore is kicked out, then it's another military leader. Secondly, there's a lot of propaganda and lies coming out of Burkina Faso. Example, one I posted on my page, and that video I posted was from my colleague. And this was a researcher and historian. Adesuwa is one of the hardest working researchers in the world. So the propaganda that, oh, Burkina Faso about 16 billion worth of gold. Does Burkina Faso have more gold than Ghana? She clarified it, no. And that's why I said, check the GDP of Burkina Faso, 20 billion. So you sold gold that is almost as what your GDP? I mean, is that even believable? Also, go and check governmental revenue in Burkina Faso. Did you see 16 billion inflow? So a lot of propaganda will come out. And you know they will do it with TikTok and the likes. Not me speaking now. There's been an Al Jazeera documentary that has shown the effect of Russian propaganda. And many top people are, on the bill of spreading this Russian propaganda. There's been extensive research. And you can go and fact check and verify them. And all of this looks too good to be true. I'm sure the next question you ask me is the influencers that go in there. Yes, a lot of influencers go in there. Wodimaya was there recently. Wodimaya's mindset is to tell the story of Africa doing well. If you see an onion factory production, it's good. Yes, those might be some good indication of what is coming out there. But it's not a reflection of the other side of the story. There's also been broadcasts of repression. The other day, a journalism institute reported about some journalists being persecuted. For a democracy, you need to have a proper right of opposition. So what we are stating is, let's have a faculty to be able to target and attack and bring out facts. And that's why I say, let's present all facts. Just like it's been proven that the video President Trump played of those alleged graveyards were lies. There were videos of a protest where they put some crosses on the road in South Africa, and he said these were graveyards of white farmers. It's also been proven that the president of America shared fake news. That one of the areas where he said, oh, white farmers were killed, one of the pictures he used was a picture from Congo. So these are facts. So for you, it's good to verify. One quick way to be able to verify, use AI tools. There's Grok there. Any information is run it through AI tools and look at the viability of that information. That's just it. We are saying let people get the fact. We are saying have a trained mind. I'm not saying I take everything. And that's why when I was talking to a guest representing and another part in the Warri conversation, and I pressed him with a fact and a Shakiri argument. A lot of people say, oh, you're taking sides. It's obvious you don't know media. When I'm interviewing somebody of opposing side, I will give you opposing facts. It's based on the strength of your arguments. If I'm interviewing a Shakiri man, for instance, that is speaking for everyone, I will give him the opposing fact of what the robo say. But when you take me interrogating somebody and say, oh, Rufai is doing this and all of that, it's all stupid. This is a high level of stupidity. Like I said, I have friends that cross border, I have job friends and everything. I have an honorable man that's like a father to me, Chief Uge, the founder of GFM Radio. In his dying bed, he says, Rufai, ensure you help me run GFM Radio. One of my greatest priorities is how to keep the legacy of the first private radio station in Delta State. I keep saying that every time. GFM Radio alive. So if you say I'm against the robo, I'm trying to keep the legacy of the robo man, what rubbish is that? So I have no dog in their fight. I want peace and development in Warri because I know how triumphant and successful Warri used to be in the 80s. But because of all these fights, we've lost a lot of economic power. So for me, it's to listen to all sides and listen to all arguments and not listen to bigotry and stupidity. I'm not here for noise, I'm here for facts. That's just my priority. It's the facts that will rule. Have a trained mind. Have a trained mind that sees all the bodies of facts, that sees all the arguments. And you see, that's the problem we have in our society. A lot of people don't have mind. So So when people are screaming and bickering, if I was interviewing an Ijo man, will I give him fact to assert his right? No. I will bring facts that the other people have given me and say this is what they are asserting as their own fact to claim ownership. It's for you to report and give me facts. Hello? Hello? I can't hear you properly. So, and when I'm also interviewing the security man, I will give him facts given to me by the Jaws and the Robos. That's how I do my work. For me, is to have a faculty. Facts. Bring your facts forward. That's just it. And the fact we put in public place and be verifiable. Then we address and tackle the facts, not sentiments, not bigotry, not lies, not lies of what stupid lie did they tell did some people tell the other day? Oh, that my father abandoned me, that my mother divorced my biological father and he abandoned me, and there was what did they call it? And the Shakira man really, what stupid lie. My father abandoned me, and the first thing I went to do in my father's village after I died is to build a library and to build a healthcare center there. You know, some people are quite very funny and stupid. Hello. Hello. Morning, please speak up. Americana from where? The line is going off. I can't hear you. Hello.
Good morning, sir.
Morning, yeah. What's your name?
My name is Femi.
From where?
From Lagos.
Go ahead. Is there anybody on your mind you'd like to forgive this morning?
Actually, if there's anyone for me to forgive this morning, it's like forgiving Nigeria. Nigerian government. Nigerian government. Because of, I just thank God for the grace of God that you were able to preach the message of forgiveness this morning. And personally, like I called you some times ago about my circumstances that I'm into a transport and I lost my job. I need a vehicle to operate as a car hire so that I'll be able to take care of my family. Due to lack of forgiveness in Nigeria, government today has caused a lot of people to lose their lives. A lot of people lost their job. Now, I think it takes consistent grace of God in someone's life to be able to forgive. But because I heard your message this morning, I'm ready to forgive.
Thank you so much.
And I think if there's anyone to forgive first, it's Nigerian government.
Thank you. I appreciate you, my brother. That's very good. One person I would like to solicit, institution that I would like to solicit is, let's forgive JAM. It's not that we're not going to call for accountability. We're going to call for accountability. But I know a lot of people have been pain, but we need to raise that pain. And please, let forgiveness rule. Please. Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Rufai, I'm very happy that you are discussing channeling this program.
Yeah.
I always adopt my heart for you. Honestly, if I have any person to forgive, I forgive you.
You forgive President Tinubu. Thank you.
Now,
sorry, I can't continue with call. The callback was too much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, before you call us, just turn off everything. I beg you, please. 0818-099-1991. If you want to forgive anybody, take our time to forgive them this morning. We need to be able to state facts. Okay, I think it's coming. Hello, how are you?
Good morning.
Yeah, morning.
Rufai Oseni.
Morning, yeah. What's your name?
Happy Sunday to you.
Happy Sunday.
Grandma Maki.
Oh, Grandma Maki, bless you.
Promotion.
Yeah.
I just want to thank the Lord for your life, for giving Nigerians hope, for giving them strength. Because in this situation, economy and everything we are passing through is like we are hopeless. When I look at everything around me, I am weak. You go to this hospital, there is no drugs for you. The drugs you find in the chemist are fake. You are scared to go to the hospital. You can't get anything, but you keep on renewing our hope that there is hope for us. May the Lord continue to strengthen you.
Amen.
May the Lord continue to be with you and your household.
Amen.
May the Lord uphold you to the end.
Amen.
In the name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Bless you so much. Thank you so much. We just need to keep hope alive. I know it's sad. Like I said, forgive Jams. People say they've not released results. I know, but for the one they have done before, and they've come out to apologize, forgive, please. Then we hold them accountable. Hello, how are you?
Hello, good morning.
Morning, yeah.
Yeah, I think Emmanuel is my name.
Okay, where are you calling from?
From Malta.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I like the topic of forgiveness, which we have been working on since last week. And I like that point where you mentioned the image and prison system. I want to believe that if we are serious about decongesting our prison facilities, forgiveness should be the means through which we can get that done as quick as possible. Because so many that are in the prison facilities, of course they call it correctional center, but I think the best way to correct their mindset and make themselves get better is to introduce forgiveness. What I mean is, people that are outside, possibly that let the situation that let somebody being in prison, someone no matter forgive the person and is still languishing there. If they are able to reunite and I say I have forgiven him, please allow him to. He has realized the negative acts of his and stuff like that. Most of people will get out and be productive, and they can even become agents of good gospel, agents of good gospel of forgiveness. And with that, we can get the prison system freed. Many minds will be set free, and we can have a better society. I think that is my point on the forgiveness. And I'd like to also encourage you with the effort you are making to assist humanity. I'd like to also mention my brother, Ambassador Musba. I've reached out to you on one particular project, and I've had your voice on POP this morning. I will reach out to you about the project we discussed, and I want to believe with better business for the liberation of our people and make them come up again with testimony. Thank you, Rufai Oseni. God bless you and have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you. Really appreciate you. Thank you. All right. 0818099199. I have to wrap it up here today because we have to play that full-length interview with the candidates of African Development Bank. I pray as you go this week, God will bless you, He'll make His favor and His face shine, but He'll give you peace in every side and every area of your life. Please go out there and forgive somebody. It is well. And hey, somebody just said, reform INEC now. That's important. We need to reform INEC now. Bless you.
The African Development Bank, since its foundation many years ago, I mean over 50 going into 60 years ago, has constantly been in the vanguard of African development. And hey, on the sidelines of the IMF meeting here in Washington, D.C., we took our time to speak to some of the candidates that might emerge as the president of the African Development Bank. You're going to be watching insights and thoughts of these leaders, what they want to do for the bank, how or where do they want to take the bank in the next couple of years if they get a chance to lead the bank. I am Rufai Oseni, right here in DC.
So my goal is to pick up the baton from the day President Adesina leaves and focus on three priorities. The first one is to make sure that we accelerate the growth that Africa requires to grow. The good news is we have 16 countries who are growing at over 6%. We need to make sure that that number continues to increase. Unless Africa is growing at a significantly faster pace, we will struggle with two key priorities for me: jobs for our young people and resolving the outstanding debt issue that we're struggling with. That's priority number one. And we will do that by investing in agriculture, infrastructure, and energy. Goal number two, priority number two, is supporting our governments, many of whom know exactly what they want, making sure that they have the financial resources that they need to finance the growth they aspire for their people. The third pillar is about the African Development Bank itself as an institution, strengthening its governance, strengthening the diversity of its leadership team, strengthening the efficiency and effectiveness of its systems and processes, leaning into our partnerships so that we scale up and leverage the influence that the African Development Bank has. And finally, investing in our staff. We've got great people within the African Development Bank. I want to unleash that energy because of the challenges that we have on the continent are significant. Look, my goal is to make sure that we take advantage of the strength of the African Development Bank, its voice, its finances, its people. The African Development Bank is uniquely positioned given its on-the-ground presence, its long history on the continent, the strong relationships that have been reinforced with time to deliver the change that we want at pace and scale. And we need to seize that opportunity. My goal in positioning the African Development Bank is to leverage that voice. Make sure we have a strong chief economist office that is not shy about speaking up on some of these controversial issues. We have to speak on behalf of, we have to speak with African countries at times like these. When we're having all these global discussions about tariffs, we must make sure we're calling on African governments to bring down tariffs between ourselves as fast as the tariffs are going up everywhere else. Secondly, when it comes to finances, obviously the recent decision of the United States government to cut its funding through USAID has had significant impact on the ground. But the reality is the trend has been with us for some time. And therefore, the African Development Bank needs to step into this process, work with governments to diversify the range of our financial resources, domestic resource mobilization. And here I'm not just talking about additional taxation. It's actually about getting sectors, the private sector, to grow significantly so that those revenues increase. And ultimately, it's also about increasing the financial capacity of the institution ourselves. There are lots of good projects on the ground. The challenge is the size of many of these projects are not large enough to have a lasting impact so that we see countries graduating from their current status to more middle-income countries on the continent. I would say all of the above. The key with regional integration is that we've got to get Africans trading with each other. Unless we fix that, we will continue to struggle for a variety of reasons. First of all, if we're not trading with each other, then our operational costs are always going to be higher than the rest of the continent, because the infrastructure costs of getting our goods off the continent to other continents means that our costs are going to be 30 to 40% more expensive. Secondly, whenever we import things from outside the continent, as we do agriculture, $50 billion of it, we are taking capital we desperately need on the continent, we're exporting it to other continents. What I want to see is to take that 50 billion and export it to Uganda, to Kenya, to Nigeria, to Senegal, We need to give each other and invest in each other's agricultural systems so that everything grows. Now, it's easy to talk about, regional integration. It's very hard to get it done, but we need to do that hard work. And I'm committed to rolling up my sleeves, working with governments to tackle the entire value chain of what it takes to get regional integration to work. It's negotiating as a bloc, as we have seen other countries do. It's looking at our borders and looking at the economics. That means that our goods are taking longer and longer at each other's borders. It is about taking into account the value chain of specific goods. It's about working with our political leadership to make some bold bets. Bold bets where you've got a regional bloc that says, we are looking at that regional bloc. Why don't we put zero tariffs between our two regional blocs? I can guarantee when people see those trucks moving between each other, the value of internal trade will make sense to everybody. It's the same formula that has led to the growth in the United States. You can drive a truck from California to Washington. In Europe, it's the same thing. You can drive a truck from Paris to Vienna. We shouldn't be surprised that these regions are growing faster than the African continent. The one thing holding us back, the one opportunity we have to leapfrog significantly higher rates of growth is regional integration. So that's priority number one for me. So that criticism applies to a lot of MDBs around the world, including the World Bank. And recent efforts that have been focused on getting private sector to work better and faster are as relevant for the African Development Bank, the World Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Bank. And my approach will be threefold. First and foremost, we need to make sure we're listening to the private sector. I will have a private sector council of people who are prominent on the African continent telling my leadership at the African Development Bank what help they need. The second thing is to make sure that the good staff that we have working on private sector development at the African Development Bank are able to do so using systems and procedures and processes that are much faster than what they currently use right now. There are some processes which are appropriate for sovereigns. You cannot use the same processes for sovereigns as you do the private sector. I want to reduce the time for both. I want to reduce the time for a private sector much faster. Because for the private sector, they're not going to wait 18 months for a decision. Every single day costs money. So that's one thing that I want to focus on significantly. The third thing I want to do is to make sure that all of the parts working on private sector are housed physically in one location. Currently, it takes too much time to work with industry specialists who are in different departments to process transactions as quickly as we would like to have it. So I want to strengthen it with a private sector vice presidency that end to end we can all hold to account. When we say, why is this transaction taking 6 months, 18 months, and 9 months, or whatever, we can trace who is responsible for it and we give them the support to get it done. The one thing that I'm going to focus on is to make sure we get rid of this language of non-regional and regional. We have one board of the African Development Bank. I will treat them as one board. I will make sure that amongst all board members, I'm going to deal with them in two ways, individually and as a board. It may sound naive, but this is exactly what I've done here at the World Bank when I've been able to effect significant change within the institution. We have to be mindful of the fact that who they associate with, that's their business. Whether they want to associate as non-regionals, whether they want to associate as island states, that's their business. My goal is to make sure we have a shared and common platform in order to make decisions. My responsibility is to the continent of Africa, our good people who deserve better, to the governments who are trying to do the right thing, to the staff of the African Development Bank as an institution. So the criticism between regional and non-regional doesn't help anyone. It's about finding common ground. Now, this is not to dismiss the criticism, because throughout the 9 months I have been campaigning for the presidency, I've spoken to everybody, all of the board members. There are legitimate concerns that they have expressed about the institution, legitimate concerns that I have expressed about the process of prioritization, and most importantly for me, legitimate concerns about achieving results, delivery. Not commitments, but actual disbursements. And that's the work we need to do. And so I will work with all board members, individually, collectively as a board, so that we have a shared sense of purpose amongst the three priorities, so that by the end of my tenure, my goal is to make sure we're not talking about regional and non-regional. We're talking about the board of the African Development Bank leading an institution to greater heights for the benefit of the African people. So when it comes to the operational side, I've spent 18 years in operations, working on the continent in various sectors, various regions, and there are good examples of how to get this thing done. I'll pick three examples. The first was the partnership between the World Bank and the African Development Bank on making finance work for Africa. It was a knowledge product that reshaped completely the financial sector on the continent in terms of licensing, in terms of expanding of products. Today, we take it for granted when we see a Nigerian bank in South Africa, a South African bank in Kenya. But that work was a knowledge product led by the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and donor partners that made a huge difference. And I was very proud to be a key leading member of that goal. The second one is more recently, M300, the African Development Bank, World Bank saying, let's give power, energy to 300 million Africans, 250 World Bank, 50 million. That type of structure gets results. And I will make sure that for some of our largest projects that are out there, Inga Dam is one that I'm particularly keen in. We've got 5 ports on the continent that could make a huge difference for regional integration. These types of large projects, I want to make sure that as president and working with the presidents of other MDBs, the private sector, we set up the structures for effective implementation. I mean, I grew up on a farm, and so the issue of climate is one that I feel very strongly about. But one of my frustrations working in development for as long as I have, is that oftentimes we get stuck on financing for climate. We get stuck on terminology, adaptation, mitigation. We get stuck on all of those things that bear no relevance to the African people that we want to serve. My goal is to make sure that we are making sustainable investments. What sustainable investments mean is that we are mindful of what the goal of the goal is. When we're having this conversation, it's because my granduncles, my aunties are still living in villages with no power. Our ultimate goal is increasing energy access for that community. We must make sure we're making those investments appropriately. The second thing we want to do is to make sure that we are pragmatic and realistic about the resources that are currently available. So the resources you point out to, yes, of course they're limited. Very rarely can I point to any program where that says that's adequate resources, whether it's in health, it's in education, it's in energy and infrastructure. The goal is to make sure that for every dollar we get, we're multiplying it 3 to 4 times. We're leveraging those resources. We're being smart about the investments we're making. For every dollar that we invest from the African Development Bank, I want to find out how much private sector capital we're mobilizing. If it's not 3 or 4 times, let's take a second look. Let's use guarantees. Let's use first loss options. Let's use syndication. Let's use all of these options that stretch the dollar as much as we can. So I am very generous. I will, in terms of where money comes from, I will take money from wherever it comes. I am proud of the fact that the World Bank had a successful replenishment of 100 billion. I want to make sure that I twist IJ Banga's arm as much as I can and get as much of that dollar being spent on the continent. I will do that for MDBs. I will do that for private sector firms. I am cognizant of the fact that we've got a lot of private sector firms on the continent with a revenue of $1 billion. I'm going to squeeze that as much as I can. Our continent deserves. So all of the 3 points that you've raised, that's a 3-part question I'm happy to address. The first one is the most important one. Everything we do has to be about that woman who is sitting at a market trying to sell her vegetables. She's been there the whole day. She has raised enough revenue for dinner that night. She's going to struggle to find money for school fees for her children, for her health, for her education. Ultimately, this entire race is about that woman and all of our women, all of our young people, all of our people on the continent who deserve better. And for them, as much as we've been talking about these macro issues that are sort of larger scale financing, large infrastructure projects, ultimately it's about the local population. The African Development Bank as an MDB reaches that group, it reaches our people by partnering with others. From day one, I will make it clear that whether it's the Africa Export-Import Bank, Africa Finance Corporation, TDB, all of them, those are partners. They will have reached to our private sector firms that the African Development Bank may not have. We're not going to compete in that space. We're going to work together, partner to deliver the results that we want. The second point that you raise about the complexity of the office of the President of the African Development Bank, it's not an easy one. It's a complex job. It's a technical job. It's an operational job. It's a political job. I am clear-eyed about what I'm getting myself into. And what's important for me is to make sure that throughout the tenure of my presidency, as I have always done in all of the jobs that I've dealt with that have been complex, is that being aware of what you know is important. Being aware of what you don't know is even more important. I am very comfortable making sure that when I'm building my teams, I'm identifying all of my weak points. I'm hiring people who are smarter than I am to make sure that collectively we are strong. Secondly, when it comes to debating options, I actually make it a point in my meetings to appoint one person whose job it is to criticize everything that I say. It doesn't matter how strongly and confident I am. I want you to criticize. When we're in that brainstorming session, I give license to people to debate complex issues. And once you've done it for one person, trust me, everybody else feels comfortable that this is not somebody who is a Mr. Know-it-all. Once we have arrived at the best possible decision, and oftentimes in complex situations it's the third and fourth best options, then it's all troops on board. We're going to execute quickly, effectively. When we get it right, great. When we don't, we self-correct, learn, and move on. I have done this in many complex situations around throughout my career. Soon after the peace agreement was signed in Sudan and South Sudan, introducing a new currency in a post-conflict situation, it was something that I dealt with. It meant on one hand I was negotiating Islamic finance versus conventional finance. I was negotiating on the same day people in suits and army generals who had just come from the bush. I was negotiating between two countries that were struggling with oil revenues, yet we managed to find consensus. We managed to deliver the change that we needed effectively, quickly, and it was done. Together with my teams, I have worked in terms of Somalia, for example, when they were coming out of Ida arrears, working with colleagues to negotiate a transition from a party who is still forming government to resolve those type of issues. And ultimately, when it comes to Ida 20, keep in mind, when we were negotiating Ida 20, the world was in lockdown. COVID had hit us. The countries we were negotiating with for additional financing were losing thousands of their citizens as we were negotiating, asking them to contribute financing. But throughout the process, as director for the IDA team, working with the leadership of the bank, we were able to negotiate verbally, start to finish, a successful replenishment. That also included bringing forward the replenishment cycle. These replenishment cycles are 3 years. We were able to bring it down to 2 years. And I haven't even mentioned the difficult differentiated positions on some topics that people felt very strongly about, whether it was climate, whether it was LGBT rights. You have in one room people with diverse views, negotiating individually with one of them, collectively with a group of them, building that consensus that resulted in that $93 billion in the midst of COVID is something that I'm very proud of. I learned a lot of lessons. I made mistakes in the process. I listened. I asked questions. What could I have done differently? And these are lessons that applied to me as an individual, my team as a whole, and the World Bank as an institution. And so when I look at IDA 21, and despite the complex environment we're in, being able to see them succeed with $100 billion in replenishment is something, again, I'm very proud of. These are the hardcore lessons I want to bring to the African Development Bank. When we talk about replenishing the African Development Fund in this environment, where your largest shareholders are cutting aid, it's complex, it's difficult. As president, you have to be there. You have to work with them. You have to make sure you've got a team that knows that they can take risks, and risks that you will be supportive, that is looking for diverse sources, that is looking to the African continent and say, in this environment, you need to demonstrate that you have done everything you can do as Africans before you ask for a dollar from outside the continent. You have to look at your balance sheet. You have to optimize it in a way that gives people comfort that you know what you're doing. And ultimately, the big secret about raising significant amounts of money is that the things that make a difference are not the money. The things that make a difference is, are you clear about the results? Have you demonstrated that for every dollar they will give you, you will be efficient and effective? And importantly, will you be transparent about how that money is being utilized? Because ultimately, in this environment, the US administration, the German administration, the Europeans, the Japanese, the Egyptian administration, the Nigerian administration wants to be in a position to say, we have constraints domestically. We made this investment into the African Development Fund because it was the right thing to do. And by the way, we can trace these resources. We know what the benefits are. And this is to the benefit of not only the continent as a whole, but our country specifically. That's the language you need to bring. It's operational, it's technical, it's also political. And that's what I'm looking forward to picking up from where Adesina has left off. Let me start with the infrastructure one, because I think we will be able to find the philosophical answers to my response on infrastructure. The infrastructure deficit is significant. The gap is significant. However, I strongly believe we can be smarter about how we invest in infrastructure. Because today, if we mapped out every infrastructure project on the continent, we will be shocked at how much it is. It's significant. In order for it to make a lasting difference, two things that I intend to do. One is to make sure that whenever we're making an infrastructure investment in one country, we're mindful about what's taking place in other countries as well. One road that connects two countries is worth 3 or 4 roads that are purely internal. Because when we build that cross-continental traffic, the benefits are significant. The second thing I want to do is to move away from this notion that infrastructure development is here, economic development takes place over there. Every road, every rail, every pipeline has to have a corridor conversation. Because if you're having a corridor conversation around one of these infrastructures, then you're also building the mechanisms by which maintenance for those roads will be done. You don't build roads in isolation from the rest of the economy. The rest of the economy is what makes sure that that road gets maintained. I should actually say 3, in the sense that the other thing that I will do when it comes to infrastructure is recognizing that our continent is unique in terms of its size and the distances. Between Kinshasa and Lubumbashi is 2,000 kilometers. When you do these road projects, procurement bit by bit, you're going to take forever. We have to upstream the evaluation, all of the environmental assessment, so that once that is done, even if you take slightly longer, from then on, it's just fundraising and construction as quickly as we possibly can. Which brings me to your final question. What does success and failure look like for me? As an individual, failure is when I feel I didn't do everything I could to make a difference. That's failure for me. If I didn't utilize every resource at my disposal, if I didn't ask all of the questions that I could have asked, that's failure. The inability to learn from my mistakes is failure. Inability to acknowledge my mistakes is failure. So for me, failure is not aesthetic. Falling down, right? That's not failure, because it happens to the best of us. If I'm not making mistakes, it means I'm not trying enough. It means that I have a comfort zone around me that is not doing the best I can. So I expect to fail, right? Success is the exact opposite. Success for me is when I'm done, somebody feels the benefit of my action. If, if, if satisfaction merely is about my feeling better, saying, look, I really looked good in that interview, that's not success. Success has to be measured by the impact you have with others. And the reason I'm clear about these interpretations is because the one thing that I do as a hobby is paint. I'm an amateur painter with acrylic. Every Saturday, 2 hours, I'll be downstairs in my basement, in my room, painting. And painting teaches you many things. Some of the best pieces of artwork were accidents. It was the brush that fell. It was the paint that spilled over. It was the fact that you held your brush 2 seconds longer than you should have. It was the fact that you mixed two paints that are... And when you see that, what happens next determines whether that's success or failure. There are people who will build around a piece of mistake and suddenly you think that's good. And ultimately success is not what happens in the basement when I'm done. It's the reaction that people have when they see that piece of work. Sometimes it's just that one smile. Other times it's because I've been able to auction a piece and donate some money to a charity on HIV/AIDS, and I see the kids have a new classroom. That's success. So that's my not so philosophical response to your question.
I think that Africa is at an inflection point. The global economy is at an inflection point. And I think it's time that Africa sees this as an opportunity to do the things that it's needed to do for a very long time. For me, Africa's biggest problem is its lack of productivity. And you know that without productivity, no economic growth, and without economic growth, no jobs. So really, and what is the reason for that poor productivity compared to other regions? It is the fact that Africa doesn't have the infrastructure that it needs, including electricity, digital connectivity, roads, etc. So I'm calling my vision Lift Africa. And the Lift Africa really stands for a large integrated infrastructure as the first pillar, because without that, there's no productivity. The second aspect of it has to do with financial innovation and private sector development. And really this is important because traditional donor resources are reducing and have been reducing. People think this is a new thing, but it actually has been happening over the last 20 years. So we really need to think differently about how we fund infrastructure development in the continent. And then the third aspect of it is transformation, the internal transformation of the African Development Bank for it to be more efficient and effective. So for me, that is my vision for the African Development Bank. We really need to go back to basics. The African Development Bank was founded in order to develop the integrated infrastructure on the continent. And I think over the last couple of decades, we've tended to stray away from that, I think to the detriment of Africa and Africa's development. So again, we go back to the basics, right? If we are not productive as a continent, then we will continue to rely on others to help ameliorate problems as they arise. And we really need, after 60 years, certainly of the existence of the African Development Bank, we need to move away from that. We need to focus on how we actually create sustainable economic growth in Africa, how we integrate Africa's economies so that they can trade more with each other. If you are worried about what's happening in the global trade, what about the opportunity represented by African trade and the continental free trade area? I mean, it is the largest free trade area in the world, and we're not exploiting it nowhere near where we need to be. And then on debt distress, I always remind people that when we talk about debt, the ratio that they refer to is debt to GDP. So you can focus all your energy on reducing the debt, in that ratio, but you can also start focusing on how you grow that GDP, because also that's a way to reduce the debt to GDP question. Now, I'm not making light of it. I mean, I think the debt issues, are real, but in terms of addressing those, we can have short-term answers, but if we want long-term answers that actually will make sure that we don't have another debt distress situation. We've had these, it seems like every 20, 30 years, Africa is in another debt distress situation. We need to once and for all take steps and actions that actually make sure that Africa never needs to get back into these things. So there are short-term interventions, helping countries with public finance management, helping countries with longer dated maturity debt, helping countries with the cost of financing of their debt. But I think more importantly for me, really addressing the productivity of the African economy once and for all. For me, the priority is that foundational infrastructure that I talked about, including the digital connectivity. A lot of economic activity now depends on seamless connectivity with regards to that. We need to look at standards. If you think about it, if you're building, a fiber, what do they call optic? Yes, exactly. From from the eastern part of Africa to the western part of Africa, a large number of countries are covered in that distance. How do you do it in such a way that you have the same standards? Because investment, it's easier for the private sector to invest in that kind of infrastructure if, for instance, the rules and the standards are very, very similar. But that kind of investment is necessary because if we're looking at payment systems, for instance, that facilitate trade, you need to have that infrastructure in place. So for me, you must have roads that link different regions. Rail is a lot more difficult, but I think that there are opportunities also to link regions using rail. We need to look at our ports so that we can trade with each other, and we need to look at digital connectivity and then a payment system that works for intra-regional trade. The reality is that MDBs and the African Development Bank has limited capital. It's a lot of capital. It's the biggest financial institution on the continent with the AAA rating, but it's still limited for the needs of the continent. Just on infrastructure alone, we're talking $100 billion, every year that's required for investment in infrastructure. So we cannot do this without the private sector. Institutional funds in Africa are estimated somewhere between 2 trillion and 3 trillion, dollars. That's a lot of money that could be deployed for investment. And I think it would be the kind of investment that would attract the private sector because it contributes to higher productivity for the continent, which is what the private sector would like to see. So how do we attract them? We attract them, first of all, by making sure that we have systems that are transparent. No private sector is going to go and try and figure out how you are all working and how your systems work, what are your approval processes. So that's important, to be able to create platforms that make it easy to engage the private sector. But in addition to that, we need to leverage our balance sheet, we need to leverage our AAA rating in order to address the risks, especially those risks that the private sector themselves on their own cannot address. And then, of course, I think it's important that we work in partnership. Mission 300 is an example of such a partnership and a platform approach. I think this is important. But you may not know this, Rufai, but Africa has over 100 development finance institutions. Wow. I mean, that's a lot of development finance institutions, all of them having received capital either from their local government or from their national government. Imagine if we could pull all of that capital together, collaborate together for a common purpose, which would be to increase the productivity of Africa by investing in infrastructure. We must be careful in characterizing the role of non-regional shareholders, because the bank, is a little bit different from the other MDBs, with 60% of the shareholders being African. So where I think the issue with the African Development Bank, of course, is that many of those shareholders are also borrowers from the bank. So I think there is a, an issue there about having strong governance and risk management to make sure that, decisions are not being made, outside of the overall interests of the bank. But having said that, okay, we partner with countries on their development priorities. Very, very important, to remember that, because if we didn't do that, I think that we would probably become irrelevant. So it's really about partnering with countries and helping them achieve their development priorities, but also the development priorities as agreed by all the countries at the African Union. So working, for instance, with Order NEPAD on the work that they've done, looking at continental infrastructure, this is important. So you'll remember that, Agenda 2063 is at the foundation of the 10-year strategy of the African Development Bank. And I think that's a reflection of the fact that, in fact, the African Development Bank is focused on the priorities of African countries. I have a very simple view of this. I talked about foundational infrastructure being critical for productivity improvement and for growth and creating jobs. Okay, so in order for Africa to industrialize, you need reliable baseload. I mean, there's just no other way to do it. If you have sort of intermittent availability of renewable energy, and that's all you are relying on to develop, then we won't develop sustainably. Technology hasn't advanced far enough for us to be able to store the energy generated from the sun or from wind, etc. So I think there is a very important role, very significant role for base load in Africa, whether that's using gas as an example, or using nuclear power as an example. But really that base load is key to any industrialization. Now the question becomes, how do we do that without exacerbating the climate issues, because they are real. Already there are studies showing that Africa is warming up 50% faster than the rest of the world. So that means that we still have to focus on particularly adaptation, for me, and mobilize funds for that. As you know, I think the amount that you quoted is a little bit below what the actual reality is. I think Africa got about $40 billion for climate from different sources, So, but it's still a tiny, tiny portion of the 277 billion that's required to help Africa deal with climate change. So we really need to, work on continuing to conscientize, I think, the world that Africa will play an important part in helping the world deal with climate change. By the way, we still have very large carbon sinks, like, for instance, the Congo Basin, as an example. So in order for us to be able to preserve that so that it helps the whole world deal with climate change, there should be an investment. There should be an investment that's coming from the rest of the world, in acknowledgement of that, gift to Africa, if you like. Again, I go back to my vision of LIFT. So I always say to people, if anyone at the African Development Bank tells you that they are going to create jobs, that's not what we do, right? We don't hire people to, at a factory or anything like that. We finance these institutions, we create the enabling environment for these institutions, and we make sure that they can be competitive. And being competitive requires them to have reliable electricity, to have access to clean water, to have access to roads so that they can, access markets. So again, that foundational infrastructure is at the heart of it. And it's really, really important. I can't emphasize this enough, that, you don't start with the outcome you want. You start with what you need to have in place to generate the outcome that you want. Jobs are created by the private sector. And the private sector needs an enabling environment to be able to create those jobs. In fact, if you look at the African economy and the extent of the formal economy is quite small. But if you look at the informal economy, it's quite large. But it is informal because, in fact, it has to, operate in informal circumstances because of lack of access, for instance, to basic infrastructure. You change that, you try and get those informal sector to formalize, and all of a sudden you have a very different Africa, which is productive and which is creating jobs for young people. But in addition to that, I want to emphasize that there are things that we can do to support the private sector, especially in fragile economies. People think that because countries have insecurity issues and, they have challenges, they don't have a private sector. They do, and sometimes very good private sector. So the bank needs to think about how we support the private sector in those countries, because it could be a way for them out of fragility and out of insecurity. So I always say that if we want to really engage the private sector sustainably, we can't continue the way we are working. They are not going to allow us to take their money, sit on it for 3 years, waiting for a project to get started. So we have to improve the way that we process projects internally, so that when we go to the board of directors to have a project approved, it's shovel ready. It's shovel ready so that when the money can start dispersing, because development doesn't happen until you start spending money and you start building things. So the bank, and it's not just the bank, to be true, it's all other MDBs, they struggle with this issue. I was in the bank, of course, and I really did start spending some serious time looking at this issue. We need to plan better. You cannot have plans that are focused on securing a budget rather than having plans that are actually focused on delivering those plans. You can't have plans at the end of the year that then materially change in January because all you were focused on was getting a budget allocated. This is important for me. So improved planning. But in addition to that, I think that we also need to make available what I call project agnostic support and capacity for project preparation and getting projects ready, working with internal project teams, but also working with countries, because a lot of countries struggle with capacity in getting projects ready for implementation. They are good projects, they will have developmental outcomes, but we need to play a bigger role in helping them to get ready. And we can do that in partnership, for instance, with the other MDBs, African not MDBs, but African development institutions, but also international institutions, to really have this sort of like consolidated technical capacity to help projects get ready for implementation. I was actually thinking about this. I have over 30 years work experience, so I've been at this for a very long time. And I was talking to somebody about how we've gone through all of these crises. The pandemic is the latest one, but before that you had the credit crisis that happened in 2008, 2009. And before that you had the Y2K. You remember, the world was going to end. We'll have to throw, exactly. So what I've learned is that, I think the French have a very good expressing that the plus ça change, exactly.
The more things the same,
The more,
the things remain the same.
exactly. So I have been tested, in fact, people don't know this, but I became acting senior vice president of the African Development Bank at the retirement of the previous incumbent on the day that lockdown was announced globally. So you can imagine nobody had ever worked the way that we were now expected to work. But at the same time, we had countries all over the continent saying that we need help. We don't know what this thing is. We don't know how to deal with it. We need help. So here you are, as an organization, you are working in a totally different way than you've ever worked before. And at the same time, you have to work harder and faster and more efficiently than ever before because your member countries are asking for help. Your clients are asking for help. So, that responsibility fell on me to lead the team and make recommendations to the board of directors on how we provide this urgent financial support to countries, how we access capital markets. If you recall, the capital markets at that time were also, very, very complicated. So I think in the current environment, that ability to stay calm, stay focused, even in the most challenging environment, is key. I'm ready from day one. This is important. But I think the other attribute that I have is the fact that I've had a lot of experience in the private sector. Most of my work experience, in fact, comes from the private sector and also working in the public sector in state-owned enterprises in logistics. But in addition to that, I've had the 6-year window where I worked in development finance. And already, within that 6-year period, I was able to introduce innovations that had never been thought of before in MDBs. I introduced hybrid capital at the African Development Bank, and of course, eventually, the African Development Bank issued hybrid capital. It became the first MDB to do that. Now all other MDBs are looking at it. And really, hybrid capital was a way for us to secure long-term financing from institutional investors rather than from our shareholders, which had generally been the trend. So that's so I've already talked about working under pressure, staying calm under pressure, delivering under pressure. And then I'm talking about innovation as well, really being able to innovate and come up with new ideas because I'm leveraging that private sector experience. And really, I think the times we live in means that we need to have a leader of the African Development Bank who will take a more unconstrained approach to solving, problems. Failure for me is failing to achieve the productivity gains that we need from Africa. So we need Africans trading more with each other, and we need to see economic growth, and we need to see jobs being created as an outcome of that investment. And so that's success, but it's also failure. If you don't see that development, then we haven't succeeded. And I mean, this is the thing that stood out for me when I first joined the African Development Bank, that in the 60 years of the existence of the African Development Bank, and the amount of money that has flowed into development in Africa, have we really optimized its use to deliver the development that Africa needs? And my view is that we can do better, and I intend to do better as president of the bank.
I'm running for the presidency of the African Development Bank because I strongly believe that I can add real value based on my not only professional experience, but also my personal experience. My mother was a housewife, and my father was a garbage truck driver. We grew in poverty, but we got out of poverty thanks to the power of education, the power of dreams and possibilities. My parents really strongly believe that education is the elevator for social progress, basically. So we worked very hard and ended up where we are today, following our education around the world. I started my career in investment banking for about 15 years, but when I was in New York as a banker, when I started, all my mind was that I should one day go back to Africa. So I steered my career towards moving back to Africa. Eventually, in 2008, I became the CEO of one of the largest investment banks at the time in Nigeria, UBA Capital. And we restructured that investment bank. So this is managerial and leadership capacity that we bring on the table as an executive from the private sector. I've been also the founder and CEO of the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Senegal. That we designed basically to really attract the private sector investment in the country, to structure strategic transaction, whether it's in the healthcare sector, whether in the electricity sector. For example, in the healthcare sector at the time, we did the first PPP ever in the healthcare sector in Senegal, where we drastically in public hospitals, improved the diagnostic, system that used to take a lot of time. If you're sick, you want to do X-rays, you want to do a scanner, you want to have your blood tested, it will take like days before you get the results. But with that project, we completely transformed the way that hospital, for example, was treating its patient. I also became then the vice president of the African Development Bank, the inaugural vice president for energy and climate change. Energy is the backbone of economic transformation. Without it, we cannot do anything. And without energy also, you cannot even have students study properly at school. You cannot even have hospitals and health centers run properly. I remember when we were young, we used to go and use the street lights to study at night, because at the time we hadn't had yet electricity at home. So it is extremely important for Africa to make sure that those 600 million people get access to electricity. That's why Mission 300 with the World Bank will be one of my top priorities if I'm elected president. I was also Minister of Economy, Planning and Cooperation. And this is very important because at that time, we did the biggest reforms of public-private partnership in Senegal. It used to take maybe 2 to 3 years to do those reforms, but within 6 months, myself and my team, we managed to introduce that bold reform that is attracting capital, private sector capital, into infrastructure, into health, and so on and so forth. I strongly believe that with all those experiences, both the private sector experience, the public sector experience in government, and vice president of the African Development Bank, our knowledge of this bank, including also our role when we were Minister of Economy and Planning and Cooperation of Senegal, where we defended Africa's interest on the global stage, whether when I represented the African Union at ministers' meeting, G20, G7 meetings, the Paris Summit on financing African economies. Just when COVID was about to end in 2021, we made sure, as a co-president of the steering committee of the summit, we convinced partners to rechannel the SDRs, of the IMF to allow our countries to have more resources to fight COVID, but also to enable our economies to recover from COVID. I believe that all those experiences put us in the best position to be the leader of this bank and to help transform the bank. The bank has done tremendously well over the last years. I strongly believe that with all these skills, with the teams that we can work with, we can really make a real difference and help Africa face these turbulent times, help Africa, navigate through these stormy waters that it is facing today. The African Development Bank have various roles to play. First of all, to be the trusted advisor of the African countries, to provide technical assistance, to provide this knowledge that is very critical so that we can engage all the African countries and make sure that the continent is really moving faster towards regional integration, to basically increase drastically inter-African trade, which is today at around 15%. This is extremely low. And if we do that, we are less exposed to those international, I would say, trade tensions. The African Development Bank also will be working very closely with Afro-Exim Bank as well, because it's our trade bank as well, and work with all the other regional development banks to ensure that we are providing the resources that are needed for us to transform our raw materials, our natural resources right here on our continent, instead of just exporting as we've been doing raw materials. And the African Development Bank can play a key role in building the infrastructure required for regional integration. This is what I call the hardware, financing the energy that is required, the roads that are required, the ports and airports. But that is not enough. You need also to make sure that we have the software enabling technology to be utilized to facilitate, let's say, payments, between buyers and sellers within the continent without going through a third party, let's say, currency. That is why, actually, Rufai, I'm planning to create a new vice presidency that will be totally dedicated to private sector. Private sector for transforming our industrialization, private sector investment into energy, private sector investment into infrastructure to enable basically that intra-Africa trade. Our economies have to grow faster, but have to be also more inclusive and growing while creating jobs and revenue generating opportunities. I believe in wealth creation that goes with job creation as well. Because if you have jobs, then you have access to some of the services, whether it's going to be paying services or public services, right? So for me, that's the number one objective of my presidency, is to work with the government, work with the private sector to create jobs and revenue generating opportunities, number one. Number two, people need social services. That is why supporting our governments with concessional resources so that the government can invest in those projects that cannot be addressed by the private sector. For example, building a health center somewhere in the suburbs, let's say, of Lagos at Surulere, or at Bergenville, or of Yeumbeul in Senegal, for example. I mean, the government has to do it because the private sector will not get into those sectors. And for example, providing access to water in rural areas, that has to be done by the government. So it is very important to support the governments have more domestic resource mobilization, but also attract the concessional money when it has to go overseas. That's very important. And also supporting, the sectors that create more jobs. If you look at the service sector, the tourism sector, those are sectors that are extremely important. And lastly, the private sector in Africa is largely dominated by the informal sector. In that informal sector often does not have social protection. Having incentives to formalize while having social protection could be also a mechanism that help the street traders, that help the poor that do not have access to social protection. Climate change is real. Africa is the least contributor to carbon emissions that are hurting the planet, but Africa is the most affected by climate change, facing dire consequences. We see countries where revenues, incomes of populations in rural areas or in suburbs, in cities, being lost because of flooding or because of droughts. And this is very serious, and the African Development Bank will continue to support countries, not only have, let's say, insurance against climate change effects by contributing to the premium that some of these countries need to pay to insure themselves against the effect of climate change, but also to build a resilient infrastructure, to build a green infrastructure, which is resilient. When I was special envoy of the president, we mobilized significant resources to help, drive private sector investment into green infrastructure. Adaptation is very critical. The bank is a leader in in climate adaptation, basically financing. More than 50% of the climate intervention of the bank going into adaptation. And we need more resources in that area. And those resources should be grant resources or concessional resources. I do not think it's appropriate for the African governments to borrow at high interest rates to finance climate change adaptation, something that Africa did not create, but that is heavily impacting our continent. So as president of the bank, I will continue to work with the government and to work with partners to ensure that climate finance adaptation is at the center, continue to be at the center of the interventions of the bank. And on the electricity sector, as a vice president for the African Development Bank, In 2017, 100% of our electricity generation funded by the bank was in renewable energy. But it doesn't mean that we finance only renewable energy. Gas is extremely important. Many countries are endowed with gas and need that gas for electricity, but also for industrialization. That's why the following year we financed the LNG project, the liquefied natural gas project in Mozambique. That is one of the biggest projects in the country that will have a tremendous impact actually on the country. So electricity is critical, and Mission 300, which is a partnership between the bank, the World Bank, Rockefeller Foundation, and African governments that is aiming to provide $300 million people with access to electricity, will be one of the biggest initiatives that I will be sort of supporting as president of the bank. And within Mission 300, we have the Desert to Power, this big initiative of the bank to provide electricity to countries across the Sahel, 11 countries. All those initiatives are initiatives that I will be sort of pushing forward for during my presidency as next president if I'm elected. What I want is to make sure that at the end of my tenure, that the bank continues to be one of the most transparent banks, development bank in the world. As a matter of fact, the ADF, for example, which is the concessional window of the bank, is ranked number 2 in terms of transparency globally among 55 concessional windows globally. At the same time, what I will be doing, Rufai, is to make sure that the bank attracts talent, that the bank retains its talent, that the bank is more agile, that the bank is less bureaucratic, because generally speaking, DFIs are seen to be difficult institutions to deal with, that are bureaucratic relatively, and I want to change that by bringing in, a lot of private sector processes and looking also at digitalization, looking at AI, because there are some processes that we can really transform and do them in a matter of seconds or minutes instead of taking weeks or days to do those processes. So all of this will be part of the reform that I will be doing at the bank to make it faster. Cutting lead time. There is no reason that we have to spend sometimes 6 months or a year before disbursing on certain projects. The governments are in a hurry. Africa is in a hurry. And the bank also need to, ensure that it is remaining relevant. Sometimes, of course, you have some tensions between, on some subjects. That's why you need a president that is not only technically good, but also that is politically astute to make sure that you're taking into account all the parties, their different interests, their different motivations. Sometimes it could be divergent, but at the end of the day, I want to be the president that makes sure that Africa's interests are defended, but also all our partners, our non-regional partners in particular, who are providing very important capital to the bank, as also seeing their objective met as well. As president of the bank, I will be listening to the governors, I'll be talking to the management and the board of the bank, work closely with them to see what needs to be changed in the governance framework of the bank, what needs to be amended, where actually the bank is in terms of implementing the conclusions of that ad hoc committee that I chaired before when I was governor and minister of Senegal. So this is one of my top priorities. During my first 100 days, I will engage those discussions to see what needs to be changed on the governance of the bank. This is a very important question, especially now. We are at a crossroad. Aid is diminishing. We've seen decisions made by some of our key partners, especially on the African Development Fund, which is actually the window of the bank that is financing the 37 lowest income countries on the continent. In 2000, ADF 16, which was done 3 years ago, in 2022, the bank had a record replenishment with $8.9 billion. It was the highest ever. So I want to take this opportunity to thank really all the donor partners that have massively contributed to the ADF, which is a very well-run fund. And I want to commend the board of directors, the management team led by President Adesina, for the excellent results that the ADF has produced over the years. As next president of the bank, I will be working very closely with donor partners that have considered basically to cancel their contribution into ADF 16, such as the United States that has decided to cancel $555 million. I will, from day one, not from when I take over as president, but even as president-elect, to start engaging the United States government, but also the Congress, to see how we can sort of change that decision by showing them the impact that the African Development Fund is providing, but also to build ways of leveraging their contribution to attract more private sector capital in Africa. That is extremely important. But also explore other donor partners, because there are other donors maybe that want to contribute to the ADF, especially also African countries that are not benefiting from ADF, that have more resources, might be willing also to step in, and that is extremely important. And third is to take ADF to market gradually, to make sure that the African Development Fund is leveraging gradually its equity to raise more money from the capital market and on-lend it to those 37 African countries, and that is important. Lastly, to really work with philanthropy, work with some of our shareholders, go to the capital market to mobilize more hybrid capital that will strengthen the bank capital base so that we can invest more with the private sector and take more risk without jeopardizing the financial strength of the bank. I mean, for me, it's very obvious. What I want at the end of the day is to make sure that this continent is more self-reliant, to make sure that this continent is creating enough jobs and revenue-generating opportunities for its people, especially for its young people and its women. At the end of the day, I want to see for the next 5 years, at least 300 million people get access to electricity through this partnership that we have with other parties, with other stakeholders, through Mission 300. I will personally work with member countries, work with the World Bank, the Rockefeller, and all the other partners, our governors, our board, and our staff, to make sure that Mission 300 is a reality. Success is also about making sure that the current team of the African Development and the project that have been approved, that have been started, that have been approved by the board, to making sure that they are implemented in the swiftest way possible. If you look at, for example, Nigeria again, we have some agro processing zones that have been approved, several of them in Nigeria. You have the iodized project on innovation, helping the youth and women and all of that. Those are very critical projects. I'll make sure that they're implemented fast and money is disbursed and impact is felt really on the ground. You have also corridors in Africa, some rails, road corridors. If you look at, for example, the Sokoto-Badagry road, those are the kind of road you need to have to link the northern Nigeria to Badagry, and then to the coastal road, Lagos, Abidjan, Dakar Highway, which will take you all the way to North Africa. These are the kind of things I want to champion. In the energy sector, you look at INGA, it has been there for decades. If we don't deliver INGA, at least start construction, over the next 2 years on the continent by working, within the Mission 300 initiative, then I think we failed. This is a project that not only will transform the DRC, but also neighboring countries, and probably even provide electricity to South Africa. Ruzizi 4 is 4 countries in East Africa that will benefit from that also project. You look at South Africa in Madagascar, it's 40%, for example, of the electricity of the country. And these are things that we must do. All these corridors, even gas pipelines that need to be built from Nigeria to North Africa, through various countries. I mean, this is extremely important. And these are things that we must do if we are serious about transforming the continent. If we don't do some of these major projects on the continent, that we don't deliver on them, then we've collectively failed. And as the president of the bank, I'll be the number one to say I failed. But I believe with the vision that we have, that the plans that we have, with the people that we're going to partner with the staff that we will retain at the bank, that we will attract, with the use of technology, with the passion, the motivation, and the drive, the sense of urgency, I strongly believe that we can succeed. We can achieve our objectives. If I'm elected as president of the bank, I will work tirelessly every day, day and night, to make sure that we achieve this objective. And I strongly believe that it's possible.
Having traveled miles and miles across the world, from being at the spring meetings in DC to the African CEOs Forum in Abidjan, just for one purpose, to interview the candidates for the presidency of the African Development Bank, to take over from the stellar work done by Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. I present to you the three candidates, which you will have heard all of their ideas for the bank in this documentary. It now comes down to the votes. They are regional partners, they are non-regional partners. On the regional scene, countries like Nigeria have a big voting sway, with about 9% of the vote. Then you have other hard hitters across the African continent. South Africa, you've got Egypt. Then across the world, you've got countries like Japan, you've got countries like the USA, you've got countries like Canada. In fact, you've got many other countries, Portugal and the likes, that also have a say in who's going to be the next president of the African Development Bank. Now it comes to the voting. The big question is, who will take it? Who will get it? Well, with the vote sway, we have presented this to you. We have presented this to you. Like they say, may the best man win, and may the development of our continent be priority in our hearts. Viva Africa, you might want to say. I'd say, let's wait for the elections. This is Rufai Oseni, reporting for the Arise News Channel.